to another episode of Vader Down. Today, we are meeting with Nikki Farid, who is a clinical recruiter for. So I love telling the story of how Nikki and I met. It was actually the first day of my first job out of college at DaVita. Nikki was transferring within DaVita to another role, and I was hired as her replacement. So I had the honor of following her around for the first 3 days while she trained me. And at one point when we were literally counting Band-Aids and saline bags in the inventory closet, Nikki had kind of a real conversation with me, and I'll call it a mentoring moment where she really just tried to set me up for success at that role and really told me kind of what I needed to know to be successful. And we kept in touch through the years during our time at DaVita. And then when I left and went to Sheridan, actually shortly after, Nikki made the jump as well to Sheridan and now Envision. And so I've had the pleasure of working alongside Nikki for many years. What I really love about Nikki is she is a living example of the Vader Down mission. And so she is a cheerleader and a voice of encouragement, not only for myself, but I know several women that I've seen her be that support system to. And really, she just does it all with the intent of wanting to empower and support women in their journey. So I'm excited for you to get to know her today. Let's dive right into it, Nikki, and give us an overview of your career and what your journey has looked like up into your current position.
Sure. So it's been a lot of ups and kind of across and side to side. I started out as an administrative assistant at a dialysis center. During that time, I was in a leadership training program and was a little bit bold in my early 20s. And I went and introduced myself to some of the senior leaders that were kind of in the back of the room observing, and was given an opportunity to interview for an assistant FA position where I relocated to a different part of the state of Florida. While I was doing that, I was in a long distance relationship and quickly realized that, being away from my support system wasn't an ideal situation. So I kind of made my way back down to my significant other, where I stepped into an insurance counselor role, where I supported dialysis patients in their insurance endeavors, which is always a fun time. From there, you kind of took me on board as a practice manager at Sheridan, and I was in that role for about 2 years, where I was remotely supporting NICU, PICU, and pediatric hospitalist practices. And again, kind of realized with a couple of one-on-one meetings with my supervisor that the practice management role may not have been the best fit, which kind of led me to recruiting, where I get to talk to people all day and kind of help them find the next spot on their career. And during my time as a recruiter, I kind of realized that part of what I love is connecting with people, but part of what I miss is kind of handing them off to someone else and not really knowing what happens throughout their journey with the company. And so about a year ago, I started a coaching training program, which I finished in 2020. And so right now I am a clinical recruiter and aspiring coach.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Looking back on your journey, Nikki, you made some kind of pivotal moves into different roles. Any key takeaways or advice you could share that helped you make those decisions or transitions in your career?
A couple of things come to mind. I think the network was really important for me, and just kind of being able to kind of build relationships with people that either helped me make moves into different roles or to different companies. I think so the network was a really big piece. And then also just really getting clear on what I wanted out of my career was important. Being able to really find fulfillment was something that I kind of searched for in every role. And so I always first started to really get a grasp of the role and really get settled in the role. And then after a while, I would get a little bit bored. And so I think over the years, I've moved into different positions to really find the right fit. So I think really being true to myself was probably something that, it took 4 or 5 positions, but ultimately I feel like now I'm in a role and I'm on a path that is is kind of leading me to where I really want to be for what I want for my life.
Looking back on your journey, was there an opportunity where maybe you didn't have much experience with at that point in time when you took the role? Can you speak about kind of that jump that you made at that point in time, where to that role where you didn't have a lot of experience in?
Leaving DaVita and going to Sheridan. So you were kind of the impetus for that change and really moving into a role where I didn't have a lot of operational experience, especially because I kind of stepped out of that role when I made the move back down to South Florida. So I think that was really a role that was new for me. And I was lucky enough to be able to have a group of supportive women, including yourself, around me to really kind of nurture me as I got settled in that role. But that was, I think, a really great opportunity that I think was kind of the starting point for me really being able to be settled in my career and really kind of blossom a little bit more. So thank you for that opportunity.
Of course. No, it was a great journey. I know that you and I had a lot of conversation at that point in time. We were pretty aligned with kind of what we both wanted to accomplish in our careers. And I think I've stayed on the operations path and you've gone down the recruiting path. And I remember when you came to me and spoke to me about when you were thinking of making that change also to recruiting at that point in time. And my feedback, and it seemed like a natural fit and change for you. I'll ask you though, how or when were you able to identify that, you know what, this operations role is maybe not the best fit for me?
Ooh. So I think there was kind of there's a lot of stress that comes along with operations. You're kind of accountable to, the people that you're supporting, you're accountable to different departments, you're accountable for the financials. And I think it ultimately kind of came down to, in my gut, I knew that, the bottom line was not really what drove me. And so in order to be a good operator, you have to be driven by kind of keeping the bottom line, in a positive place. And so really being able to know that my passion was the people portion of it and trying to find a role that really allowed me to focus on the people portion. That was kind of I think a defining moment, but I think it was kind of a combination of, I don't think that this job is the right fit for me. And then also just the stress was a little too much for me to handle personally.
Good. No, fair. And, good for you for being able to be aware of all of that and make the change. So let's transition and talk a little bit about women in the workplace. What is your experience or perspective of what I'll call the good old boy club or networks, more to say? And can you share any examples of when you've experienced this in the workplace?
So I actually have not really had any major instances in my career where kind of the good old boy club came up for me. I actually have worked with women really the good majority of my career. I've had a handful of male leaders from time to time. I would say the only kind of major difference that I've noticed in being led by women versus men is just the kind of the empathetic approach, or just kind of the emotional piece where men may not have been as able to support me in that endeavor. But in terms of feeling like I was locked out because I was a woman or something along those lines, I have never really experienced that. And I think part of that is just because the majority of my, I guess we'll call it a village, has been predominantly women.
And so in your experience in working with women, have they really helped raise each other up and empower each other from your perspective? And if so, can you maybe share just an example of where you've seen that, or maybe where you haven't seen that since you have had a lot of experience in working with, women in the workplace?
I think the first kind of, I would say maybe kind of experience with women is almost there's a little bit of a clique kind of nature that existed when I was in this one team. And there was almost like, if you weren't in the clique, you almost felt excluded. And so I think there have been instances where, if you're not, if you don't say the right things or do the right things or kind of follow someone's lead. You may not necessarily be in the in-group. And so I think there have been periods where I may have felt excluded from, just maybe what was going on or things that were happening at a higher level. And on the flip side, I've also been a part of teams with women where there's a lot of support and a lot of just camaraderie and being able to, share what our challenges are and share the things that we've been able to overcome so that we ultimately are all able to be successful. So I've definitely seen both sides of the coin, but I think I'm fortunate enough that I've had a lot more of those positive experiences than the negative ones.
Yeah, you and I actually had the benefit of working together side by side and actually with a few other women where we had this very nurturing, encouraging relationship amongst all of us. We were all in the same role. And I truly feel like it was one of a kind of experience where we had this group of women that really, we were solely there to build each other up, support each other, have each other's back. What do you think created that experience that we had? Because I really do feel it was a unique part of my career and probably yours as well.
I think it was interesting because I think as I was initially kind of getting settled on that team, I think that there were periods of time where I might have tried to kind of fit in by being a little bit more, I guess stoic is the best word that kind of comes to mind. And so I tried that for a couple of months and then quickly realized that it's really hard not to be myself. And so I think I kind of let my hair down a little bit. And then our manager at the time set us up with an executive coach who led a team building exercise. And I think being able to work with that executive coach, I think that there were things that came out during the initial interview process. And then after the team building event, I think from my perspective, there seemed to be a shift in the way that we all interacted with one another. And I think part of that team building exercise probably helped us develop, more trust, which ultimately led to, that really special one of a kind dynamic that you mentioned.
Yes, trust, definitely the foundation of any strong relationship. So I think that's a good point. And it's interesting that you brought that up because I didn't even remember that until you just until you mentioned it. Everyone's perspective is different on it. Why I asked. So if you could change one thing about the woman in the workplace right now, current state today, what would it be and why?
Speaking for myself and maybe speaking for some women that I have worked with as a coach over the last year and a half, is really being able to kind of be clear about what you want and making sure that you're asking for what you want. So I think as a woman, and even just for myself, it took me a very long time to really get comfortable in even just saying like, hey, I'm drowning here, I need help. And so being able to feel empowered to, say that you have too much on your plate or being able to have an open conversation about, what you want out of your career or what you need from your leader. Just feeling more empowered to kind of speak your truth, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. Because I think that, we're all we grow up in such a way that we may not be as comfortable talking about those things. Or really kind of speaking up for our needs and what we desire. So I would say just, women just being able to kind of stand firm in what they want and what they need and being able to communicate that effectively.
Right. And when one person does that, it really can have a domino effect and cascade, right? So if you see me really speak my truth and speak my mind, that may inspire you and vice versa, across different relationships and different organizations. So it really can have a cascading effect by doing that. If you look back to when you started as an administrative assistant at DaVita, if you could tell that Nikki back then a bit of advice of something that you wish you knew back then that you know now, what would it be and why?
So there are two things. So the first thing is kind of financial. I think I did not know how to negotiate. I really didn't, I mean, even kind of moving into the recruiting role, I think that there were things that were set, but I didn't really know that I could say, this is the dollar amount that I want, or this is the salary that I'm looking for. And so I think that would be kind of the first thing, just, it's okay to ask for more than what you're currently earning. It's okay to just ask for what you're looking for in terms of salary. And then I think the other thing for me would be, I would tell little Nikki to just not take things personally. I give a lot in my work. And so I think that there are times where if something goes wrong, or if someone says something, I will really take it to heart. And at the end of the day, taking things personally doesn't really serve anybody. And I think it ended up creating a lot more stress and probably more of a burden that I could have carried around with me. So not taking things personally would be another thing that I would tell my younger self.
Looking back on your journey, if you could do something differently, would you change anything and why?
So it's an interesting question, because I think part of me knows that if I didn't do all of the things that I did, I wouldn't be where I'm at. And I'm so grateful to be in the place where I'm at today and kind of on the path that I'm headed. So I guess to not answer your question, that's my first answer, is that I don't think that I would change anything. But I guess going back to that kind of what piece of advice would I give my younger self, I think I would probably ask for more money at different periods of time, and really kind of see my value and what I'm able to bring to the table, and maybe be earning a little bit more because of that. So I would say that, maybe just being a little bit more comfortable in talking about dollars would probably be something that I would have changed.
What's the best advice that you've received along the way in your career so far?
Don't take things personally was something that a leader within the last year has kind of shared with me. And that's something that I think even she saw in me. Don't take things personally, Nikki. So I think that's definitely one piece of advice that I think was super important, and it's still kind of something that is a work in progress for me, but I'm certainly getting better. And I hear her in the back of my mind when I do start to, beat myself up or whatever it may be. I think the other piece is someone once told me that perception is reality. So even though I might think that I'm just being kind of happy-go-lucky and trying to, make people laugh during a presentation, if there is a senior level executive in the room, they might perceive my kind of humor or my approach to the presentation as not really caring. And so that was another thing that really stuck with me, is that even though I may not think that I'm being perceived in a certain way, that person's perception is their reality. So it is important to be mindful of the way that you come across, because, it's going to land differently for different people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very good advice. How about fulfillment? Has there been a certain role where you have felt the most fulfillment in your career?
I don't know that it's necessarily a role per se, but I think the component of all of my roles, there has been a level of kind of service to others. And so I don't think it's necessarily a role per se, but I think it's that component of really being able to serve other people. So, as an insurance counselor, I got to help dialysis patients who couldn't understand their insurance because it's impossible to understand. As a practice manager, I got to support the providers that worked in my practice. As a recruiter, I get to, serve the candidates and really being able to get a feel for what they're looking for, where they want to be, and kind of match them to the right opportunity. And then I also just take personal pride in being able to really advocate for them as it relates to, what the offer looks like, so that, should they decide to join our team, they'll have, the financial components that they'll need, as well as the job that they like. And then as a coach, that's really all it is being in service of others. And so I think just the service piece is what really, really fulfills me. And so sometimes even as a recruiter, when I do have to kind of juggle all of the different pieces and components, as long as I can kind of keep myself focused on the kind of the service component of that, I can, remain fulfilled.
Viewers that are watching now that aspire to be a recruiter, what skills would you tell them to harness and why?
Interpersonal skills are really big. Just being able to, I mean, there's really not a whole lot of jobs that you can do where you're not interfacing with people. And so I think it's really important to be able to, have conversations with people, be able to listen, be able to verbal, written communication is important. Emotional intelligence, I would say, is another component of interpersonal skills, and really being able to have a grasp on how you show up, and then how you might be perceived by others, and how you're able to gauge other people. So I would say those are two pretty important ones.
We all encounter stress in our work and our personal lives day to day. How do you deal with it? And do you have any advice on dealing with stress for our viewers?
Stress, I mean, I would consider myself to be a high stress individual, and mostly just because I have a pretty active mind. So I think a lot of times it can be challenging for me to just juggle the day to day along with personal stuff and all that. For me, what's been really helpful in kind of managing my own stress levels has been yoga and meditation. I am getting back into my yoga practice because I realize just the kind of power of kind of physical movement and being connected to my breath. And really just the entire yoga practice really just grounds me. And I think for someone who has an active mind, it's really important for me to be grounded as I kind of approach the day. Otherwise, I can get caught up in all the things that are going on in my head. And meditation too has been a real blessing, and it's taken me almost 2 years to be able to even just get to a regular practice where I'm, meditating at least, 3-4 days a week. But just being able to kind of have that pause button to really kind of sit down, reset, take a breath, really kind of allows me to refocus my energy. And then, as you know, I'm also a big fan of therapy. So I think that as life gets stressful, I trust my licensed professional to kind of guide me through those really stressful moments. So, I kind of have the individual piece that I do on my own with yoga and meditation, and then also defer to my specialist when I need to.
Meditation is a really challenging practice, especially to kind of get into and to start doing consistently. What worked for you in order to really start making meditation more of a consistent practice versus just something you did here and there?
I have to tell you a little bit of a story in order for it to make sense. But so my therapist initially told me about MBSR. It stands for Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And so it is a meditation course. It's an 8-week program. So I completed that in 2019. And so that was really my first kind of taste of meditation. And so it was an intense 8 weeks. Probably 45 minutes of practice per day was what they kind of prescribed. But it was I knew the benefits, but it wasn't something that I really stuck with. And one of the interesting things about the program was at the end, the instructor asked us to write a letter to ourselves that just kind of encapsulating all the things that we had learned throughout the mindfulness program. And I got that letter right at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was a very, very timely kind of message to get from myself to myself to say, hey, Nikki, remember, you have all of these tools within you to kind of keep you peaceful. And so that was kind of a nice reminder. And then I did a course in April of last year called The Science of Wellbeing, which actually shows meditation there's science behind the fact that it can actually make us happier. And so there was I think at the end of the course, there was a homework assignment where you had to choose 2 of the kind of proven methods of increasing your happiness. And so I chose meditation. And I think being able to kind of have something to track my progress during this course, and really being able to kind of utilize that homework assignment as I'm going to really start to develop my meditation practice was really the beginning of that. But, it took over a year to really realize that, there are benefits to this. And if I really kind of put my mind to it and set the time aside, I can really benefit from it. But it is tough to get into the practice for sure.
What Vader Down is really founded on of this saying of sending the elevator back down. So in your own words, what does that mean to you?
It's powerful. I think, and I'm honored that you've kind of asked me to be here to even talk about it. But I think the reason that we're all here is to kind of help one another and to really leave a positive impact on the people that we interact with. And so I think for me, sending the elevator back down is helping other women kind of rise up, helping young women or girls who may not have the same opportunities as others. I actually, for the last 2 years, I've been a mentor for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Broward County, and I've been working with, she was 5 and now she's 7. And so, for me, understanding kind of the opportunity to be able to really kind of help shape how someone views the world, or what their opportunities or what their value might be. I think that's really what kind of sending the elevator back down is. Just really, if we're able to go up, we should be sending it back down and helping others come up with us.
When it comes to the healthcare industry, in your opinion, what are we currently underestimating in the short term and overestimating in the long term?
I think we're underestimating the power of education and prevention, and we're overestimating cures or treatments for things. When I think about all of the chronic illnesses that are out there, and just, the people that end up having to be, I think dialysis is a great example. So you've got people who knew that they were going to be in kidney failure, and they could have taken steps in order to kind of change their diet or their lifestyle that would ultimately help them not end up on dialysis. But sometimes it happens. And so I almost think that there's an opportunity to really kind of look at lifestyle and diet, and really kind of educate people on how all of those things can really impact their health versus, all right, well, now you're sick, so let's treat it.
Great point. Preventative care is a huge area of healthcare that's a big, I would say, Pandora's box that is very hard to tackle, but definitely you. All right, so as we wrap up today's interview, Nikki, what is that key lesson that you really want viewers to hear from you and take from your interview today?
I think that, people might envision their career being the climbing of a ladder or going up an elevator. I think that there's a lot of different ways that your career can kind of flow. And so I think being able to be open to things that might present themselves to you, or just being open to, different opportunities that might be out there. So I think really being open to different possibilities, and then just, not expecting your career to be one thing, because it could turn out to be totally different. And that totally different path might be even more special than, kind of the straight up or whatever path you thought was going to work for you. I'm Nikki Farid with Vader Down, and I'm sending the elevator back down.